"Finish it quickly," said the young Apache woman, but the cowboy refused to let her die. The sun was beginning to set over the endless stretches of the desert. Its golden light cast long shadows over the dusty land, turning the sand into a sea of orange and gold. The wind whispered softly, carrying with it the smell of dry earth and sagebrush. Out in this quiet, unforgiving landscape rode a lone cowboy, his horse moving steadily over the rough terrain. His name was Jake, a man known across the small towns and outposts for his quiet courage and sharp instincts. He wore a weathered hat, a dusty coat, and boots that had traveled more miles than most people could imagine. His face, tanned and lined by the sun, told the story of a life spent riding, surviving, and learning from the harsh world around him. Jake had been riding for hours, scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble or life. The desert could be peaceful and beautiful, but it could also be dangerous. One wrong step, one wrong choice, and it could take everything from a man. He had faced storms, bandits, and wild animals, but nothing could prepare him for what he was about to find. As he rounded a rocky ridge, he saw a figure slumped against a boulder. At first, he thought it might be a rock or the play of shadows in the fading light. But as he got closer, he realized it was a young woman. Her clothes were torn and covered in dust, and blood stained her arms and legs. She was trembling, her breathing shallow and her eyes barely open. There was no one else around, just the two of them and the silent desert. Jake dismounted his horse carefully, his boots crunching on the dry sand. He approached her slowly, not wanting to frighten her but ready for anything. "Hey there," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" The young woman's eyes fluttered open, revealing dark, wary eyes filled with pain and exhaustion. She tried to speak, but her voice was weak. Finally, she whispered, "Finish it quickly." Jake stopped for a moment, shocked by her words. It wasn't often that someone asked him to end their life. But when he looked at her, he saw not just fear, but determination, pride, and a spark of life that refused to die. She was young, perhaps no more than 18 or 19, and yet she had survived something terrible. Something that had left her on the brink of death, alone in the desert. "I'm not going to do that," Jake said firmly, kneeling beside her. "You're not going to die out here, not on my watch." The woman's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and disbelief. "You don't understand," she whispered. It's better if I'm gone. No one can help me now." Jake shook his head. "I understand more than you think. I've seen people fight, struggle, and survive when it seemed impossible, and you're going to survive too. You're not alone anymore." Carefully, he lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, almost fragile, but her grip was strong, as if she were clinging to life with everything she had left. Every step he took through the rough terrain sent jolts of pain through her body, but she didn't cry out. She didn't plead again. Instead, she simply closed her eyes, trusting him, or perhaps surrendering herself to whatever fate he would provide. The journey was slow and exhausting. Jake had to stop often to let her rest, to tend to the bleeding and clean the dirt and cuts as best he could with the limited supplies he carried. He tore strips of cloth from his own shirt to make bandages and poured water carefully over her lips so she could drink without choking. He knew the desert wouldn't forgive weakness, and neither would her wounds, but he refused to give up. He had faced storms that could strip the skin from bones, bandits who could take everything in a moment, and loneliness that could crush a man's spirit. But helping her survive was something he would not abandon. As they moved, the young woman began to speak in small, halting words. She told him her name was Ayana. She belonged to a group of Apache people living in the mountains nearby. There had been a raid, a fight with a rival group, and she had been caught in the crossfire. Her family was gone, her friends scattered, and she had fled into the desert, only to collapse from her injuries and exhaustion. Jake listened quietly, offering words of comfort and encouragement whenever he could. "You're stronger than you know," he told her. "You've made it this far. That means you can make it the rest of the way. Yana's voice trembled as she spoke, but there was a flicker of hope growing in her eyes. Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. Jake smiled faintly. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because no one deserves to die alone. And because you're not just anyone, you're someone who still has a chance at life, and I'm not going to let it slip away." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the desert turned a deep purple and blue. Stars began to twinkle in the vast sky above, offering a quiet, cold light over the land. Jake set up a small camp for the night, building a fire that crackled and cast warm light over their small shelter. He made her as comfortable as he could, gently cleaning her wounds and keeping her warm. Yana watched him work silently, amazement and gratitude filling her eyes. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of safety, a sense that perhaps she could survive. I thought it was over," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would help me." Jake nodded, not taking his eyes off her. "You've got to believe, even when it seems impossible. That's what keeps people alive. You've got more fight in you than you realize, and I'll be here to make sure you get through this." As the night deepened, the desert grew quiet except for the crackling fire and the soft sounds of the wind. Jake kept watch while Ayana rested, never letting his guard down. He knew the desert could be cruel, that danger could come from any direction, but he also knew that giving up was not an option. Her life was in his hands, and he would not fail her. Hours passed slowly, the stars shifting overhead as the desert slept. And in that quiet, fragile moment, a bond began to form between them. It was a bond of trust, courage, and the shared understanding that survival sometimes depended on the kindness and determination of others. Jake had saved her from death once, but more importantly, he had given her hope, the first glimmer of hope in days. And hope, he knew, could be stronger than any weapon, more powerful than any danger, and more enduring than the harshest desert sun. The first light of dawn spilled across the desert, painting the sand and rocks in soft shades of pink and gold. The world seemed calm, but Jake knew the desert's quiet could be deceiving. Danger often hid in its stillness, waiting for the right moment to strike. He carefully packed their modest camp, making sure Ayana was awake and steady enough to move. Her body ached, and her wounds still pained her, but the warmth of the fire and the sense of safety from the night had strengthened her enough to try the journey ahead. "Are you ready?" Jake asked gently, helping her to her feet. Yana nodded, her dark eyes focused but still tinged with uncertainty. "I think so," she whispered. Each step was a struggle, but she refused to fall back. She had already faced death once and survived, and now she wanted to keep moving forward, even if her body felt weak and fragile. Jake strapped his small pack onto his horse and carefully lifted Ayana onto the horse behind him. Her legs were too weak to walk, and he needed to keep her safe from the rough ground, sharp rocks, and dangerous creatures that prowled the desert. As they rode, the wind whipped past their faces, carrying with it the scent of sage and distant mountains. The world stretched endlessly before them, a vast wilderness filled with both beauty and danger. They traveled in silence at first, each lost in their thoughts. Jake thought about the risks ahead, the path they would have to navigate, and the people who might be looking for Ayana. He had faced danger alone before, but protecting someone else added a weight he had never carried. Yet he welcomed it because it gave him purpose beyond himself. Ayana, on the other hand, thought about her home, her family, and the life she had left behind. She remembered the laughter of her siblings, the warmth of her mother's cooking, and the stories her father told by the fire. Those memories were bittersweet, a reminder of what she had lost, but also a motivation to survive. Every mile they traveled through the desert was a step closer to safety and a chance to live again. The sun rose higher, making the desert glare bright and unrelenting. Jake adjusted the horse's pace, keeping it steady so that Ayana wouldn't jolt in pain. He scanned the horizon constantly, watching for any sign of bandits, wild animals, or sudden drops in the terrain. The desert was beautiful, but it was unforgiving. One wrong move could send them tumbling down a rocky slope or leave them stranded without water. "You've been quiet," Jake said, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" Yana hesitated, then spoke softly. I never thought I would meet someone like you. Someone who wouldn't just leave me to die." Her voice trembled, but there was a hint of gratitude and relief that shone through the exhaustion. Jake glanced at her, a small smile forming on his sun-weathered face. People survive because someone cares, even if it's just a little. And right now, that someone is me. You've got too much fight in you to give up. As the day wore on, the desert began to test them. The heat rose sharply, making the sand shimmer in the sunlight. Every step of the horse kicked up dust, and every gust of wind carried it into Yana's eyes. Jake had to stop several times, letting her drink water from a small flask and resting in the shade of rocks whenever he could find them. She closed her eyes during these breaks, drawing strength from the quiet and from Jake's steadfast presence. During one particularly grueling stretch, they came across a narrow canyon. The walls rose steep and jagged on either side, casting shadows that danced across the ground. The path was uneven, filled with loose stones and hidden dips. Jake guided the horse slowly, carefully navigating every step. "Almost there," he said, more to reassure himself than her. "Just a little further and we can rest properly." Yana held onto him tightly, feeling both fear and trust. She could sense the danger in every rock and every shadow, but she also felt the steady strength of the man guiding her. It was a strange feeling, relying so completely on another person, but it was necessary for survival. As they passed through the canyon, Ayana began to talk more, sharing small stories of her childhood and her people. She spoke of the mountains where her family lived, the small streams that sparkled under the sun, and the traditions that had been passed down through generations. Her voice, soft and hesitant at first, grew stronger as she spoke. It was as if telling her story helped her feel alive again, reminded her that she was not just a survivor but someone with a history, a culture, and a purpose. Jake listened quietly, occasionally asking questions to keep her talking and her mind off the pain. He realized that helping her survive was not just about tending to wounds and navigating the desert. It was also about helping her remember why life was worth living. Every story she shared, every laugh she forced through the pain, reminded him why he refused to leave her side. By late afternoon, they reached a small spring hidden behind a cluster of rocks. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and a few birds flitted around, singing their simple songs. Jake led the horse down carefully, letting Ayana drink and rest. He washed her face with cool water, letting her feel something refreshing for the first time in days. "This will help you feel better," Jake said, smiling gently. "You're doing great. Just keep going a little further and we'll find somewhere safe to camp for the night." Yana smiled weakly, her first genuine smile in days. I never thought I would feel hope again," she admitted. "But you make me believe I can survive." Jake nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. This was why he kept moving, why he refused to give up. Helping someone survive, giving them hope, was more rewarding than anything else he had done in his long life on the desert trails. The evening approached, and the sky turned shades of orange and purple once again. Jake guided the horse to a safe spot, flat and sheltered, where they could rest for the night. He built a small fire, enough to keep the cold away but not so big as to draw attention. He tended to Ayana's wounds again, checking for infection and making sure the bandages were secure. As she rested, leaning against him and feeling safe for the first time in days, she whispered, "Thank you for not letting me die." Jake looked down at her, his eyes serious but kind. "You're not just anyone," he said. "You're strong and you're brave, and now you've got a chance to keep living. Don't waste it." The stars appeared one by one in the night sky, twinkling above the desert's vast silence. Jake kept watch again, knowing that danger could return at any moment. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. They had survived another day. They had fought the desert, pain and fear, and come through it together. Yana drifted to sleep, her body still tired but her spirit lifted. She dreamed of home, of mountains and streams, and of the possibility of a future she had almost thought impossible. Jake stayed awake, listening to the wind and the soft sounds of the desert at night. He knew tomorrow would bring more challenges, more obstacles to overcome. But he also knew that together, they could face whatever came next. In the quiet of the desert, a bond had grown between the cowboy and the young Apache woman. It was a bond built not on words alone, but on trust, courage, and the shared struggle to survive. The journey was far from over, but they had learned something important. That hope, determination, and the kindness of another human being could carry them farther than they had ever imagined. And as the desert night stretched on, with stars shining like silent witnesses above, Jake silently promised himself that he would not let Ayana's story end in the harsh sands. He would see her safe, healthy, and alive, no matter what the desert demanded from them. The morning sun crept slowly over the horizon, painting the desert in soft shades of gold and amber. Jake stirred first, as was his habit, his eyes scanning the vast landscape for any sign of danger. The night had been quiet, save for the distant howl of a coyote and the occasional whisper of the wind through the rocks. Beside him, Ayana slept peacefully, her breathing steady and calm for the first time in days. Her face, pale but healing, reflected the comfort of safety, a comfort Jake had promised to provide and was determined to keep. Carefully, he prepared a small breakfast of water, bread, and dried meat, feeding Ayana little by little. Her body was still weak, and she needed to regain strength before they could continue their journey. He sat with her patiently, watching her eyes flicker open and greet the day. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," Ayana replied, her voice weak but filled with quiet gratitude. She tried to smile and Jake nodded approvingly. "You're doing better," he said. "Your body is healing. You've got more strength than you think." Ayana's eyes darted to the horizon, where the mountains loomed in the distance. They were far away yet close enough to be a beacon of hope. "Do you think we can reach them soon?" she asked. Jake hesitated for a moment. The path would be difficult and the desert offered no guarantees, but he wanted her to believe in the possibility of safety, so he nodded. "We can," he said firmly. "It won't be easy, but we'll make it together." With that, they began moving again, carefully navigating rocky paths and dry riverbeds. Jake adjusted the pace so Ayana could ride comfortably on the horse, making frequent stops for rest and water. The desert heat was harsh, but the thought of the mountains kept their spirits lifted. Every small accomplishment, every mile they traveled without incident, was a victory that strengthened their determination. As they journeyed, Ayana began to open up more about her life before the attack. She spoke of her family, the traditions they followed, and the lessons her elders had taught her. "My father always said the desert is a mirror," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "It reflects who you are inside. If you are strong, it shows strength. If you give up, it reflects weakness." Jake listened intently, impressed by her wisdom despite her youth. "Then you've already proven yourself strong," he said. "You didn't give up when it would have been easy to do so." She smiled faintly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in days, she felt pride in herself, not just gratitude toward Jake. I guess I have," she admitted. "But I couldn't have done it without you." The bond between them grew stronger with each passing mile. They relied on each other for survival, but beyond that, a deeper trust began to form. Ayana found comfort in Jake's calm presence, while Jake felt a sense of purpose he had not known in years. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of silence that spoke louder than words. Each night, Jake made sure the camp was safe, tending to Ayana's injuries and keeping the fire small but steady. Each day, he encouraged her, offering gentle reminders that survival was a matter of determination and hope. One afternoon, as the sun blazed high in the sky, they reached a small ridge overlooking a canyon. The sight took their breath away. Below them, a narrow stream cut through the rocky land, and clusters of green bushes and small trees provided a rare oasis in the harsh desert. "Water," Yana whispered, pointing toward the stream. Her eyes sparkled with renewed energy. Jake smiled. "Good eyes," he said. "We'll rest there and let you regain more strength. You've earned it." They carefully guided the horse down the uneven path, keeping a close eye on each step. Yana dismounted slowly, her legs shaky but willing to move. She drank deeply from the stream, letting the cool water wash over her face and hands. For the first time since the attack, she felt a sense of relief and hope that went beyond mere survival. The oasis was not just a physical refuge. It was a reminder that life could endure even in the harshest conditions. As they rested, Ayana began to confide in Jake more openly. She spoke of the pain she had endured, the fear she had felt when she believed she would die, and the courage she had forced from within herself to keep moving. I thought it was over for me," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "But you refused to let me give up. That meant everything." Jake put a hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "You've got more strength than you know," he said. "I only helped you find it, but it was always there. You just needed a reason to fight." The conversation turned to lighter subjects, too. They spoke of the desert wildlife, the beauty of the mountains ahead, and the small dreams they each held for the future. Laughter slowly returned to Iyana's voice, a sound that lifted the weight from both their hearts. Jake, who had lived years in solitude, felt a strange sense of joy at hearing it. For the first time in a long while, he felt not just like a survivor but a companion, a protector, and a friend. As evening approached, Jake set up camp near the stream. He made sure Ayana was comfortable, carefully washing and dressing her wounds, and giving her food and water. She lay down near the fire, feeling her muscles relax in the soft warmth. The night air was cool and refreshing, carrying with it the faint scent of desert flowers and the gentle sound of water flowing nearby. Yana looked at Jake, a question in her eyes. "Do you ever think about giving up?" she asked quietly. Jake shook his head. "Not when someone's life depends on me," he replied firmly. "Giving up isn't an option. I'll keep moving, keep fighting, and keep surviving. That's what life is about, facing the hard things and pushing through." Yana nodded, inspired by his words. She felt a growing determination in herself, a desire not just to survive but to thrive. "Then I'll try," she said softly. "I'll try to be as strong as you believe I can be." The stars appeared above, shining brightly in the clear desert sky. Jake kept watch again, scanning the darkness for any sign of danger while Ayana rested peacefully. The quiet of the desert night was comforting, a gentle reminder that, for now, they were safe. But both knew that the journey ahead would be challenging. They would have to navigate mountains, face uncertainty, and confront dangers that could threaten their lives at any moment. Still, in that moment there was hope. Hope that they could reach safety, hope that they could heal, and hope that they could continue forward together. The bond between them had grown stronger than either could have imagined, built on trust, courage, and the shared struggle to survive. As sleep finally took hold of Ayana, she dreamed not of the past pain but of the future possibilities. She saw herself standing tall, walking through mountains and forests, and living a life that had once seemed impossible. Jake sat by the fire, watching over her, feeling a quiet pride in their progress. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that together, they could face whatever challenges came their way. And so, in the quiet desert night, two souls, one cowboy, one young Apache woman, found strength in each other. They learned that survival was not just about escaping danger or enduring pain. It was about finding hope, trusting others, and discovering the courage that lies within. The desert was still vast and unforgiving, but it no longer seemed quite so lonely. Together they would continue the journey, step by step, towards safety, healing, and a future neither had thought possible just days before. The next morning, the desert sun rose slowly, painting the horizon in deep shades of orange and pink. The quiet was deceptive, almost too calm, as if the desert itself were holding its breath. Jake stirred first, as usual, scanning the surrounding terrain for any signs of danger. He knew that even in moments of peace, trouble could appear without warning. Beside him, Iana was already awake, her eyes bright with cautious hope. She had slept better than she had in days, and the warmth from the small fire they had built last night seemed to have healed more than just her physical wounds. It had eased the heaviness in her heart as well. Jake packed their minimal supplies, ensuring Iana's horse was well fed and hydrated. They had traveled far, but the mountains where her people lived were still distant. The journey ahead would not be easy. Narrow paths, rocky cliffs, and treacherous terrain awaited them, and they would have to stay alert every step of the way. Yet Jake felt a growing confidence, not just in himself but in Iana. She had endured so much already, and he knew she had the courage to keep going. As they moved, Iana noticed a flicker of movement in the distance. "Do you see that?" she asked, pointing toward a ridge where the sun glinted off something metallic. Jake squinted. His instincts told him that something was not right. Slowly he guided the horse closer, keeping a careful eye on the horizon. Soon it became clear. A small group of men, armed and riding swiftly, were heading in their direction. The realization hit both of them like a cold wind. These were the same forces that had attacked Iana's village, the same men who had left her wounded and alone in the desert. Jake's jaw tightened. "We need to move fast," he said calmly, though his heart raced. "They're after you, but we can stay ahead if we're careful." Iana's eyes widened with fear. "They're so close. What do we do?" Jake reassured her, his voice steady. "We keep moving. Stay quiet, follow my lead, and trust me. We've made it this far, we can make it further." The two of them picked up their pace, the horse moving swiftly over the uneven desert terrain. Every gust of wind, every shadow, and every distant sound made Iana tense. She clung to Jake, trusting his judgment and finding courage in his unwavering determination. The men behind them were relentless, but Jake had learned the desert's secrets over the years: hidden paths, narrow valleys, and rocky ridges that could provide cover and slow their pursuers. As they navigated a narrow canyon, Jake dismounted and led the horse carefully along the rocky edges. Iana's legs were still too weak to walk alone, so he supported her every step. The men chasing them were skilled, but the canyon's twists and turns worked in their favor. They ducked behind boulders, climbed small ridges, and moved silently, using the desert itself as a shield. Hours passed, and the sun climbed high in the sky, beating down on them relentlessly. Sweat ran down their faces, and the horse's flanks were slick with effort. Iana's breathing grew heavy, but she refused to give in. She thought of her family, of the life she wanted to reclaim, and of Jake, who had refused to let her die. Each step forward was a testament to her growing strength and determination. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small plateau overlooking a valley filled with dense brush and scattered rocks. Jake stopped and scanned the horizon. The men chasing them were still visible, but the canyon and plateau gave them a chance to plan. "We'll use the valley to hide," Jake said, pointing toward the thicket below. "It's dense enough to break their line of sight. If we move carefully, they won't find us easily." Iana nodded, gripping his arm tightly. "I trust you," she said. Carefully, they guided the horse down into the valley, moving as quietly as possible. The dense brush scratched at their clothes and arms, but it also provided cover. They crouched low, using the rocks and shadows to conceal themselves from the approaching riders. Jake's heart pounded, not just from the chase but from the knowledge that failure was not an option. He would not let Iana fall into their hands, not again. Hours passed in tense silence. The riders passed near the valley but did not spot them. Jake and Ayanna held their breaths, barely daring to move. Every sound, every rustle of leaves made them flinch. But eventually the danger seemed to fade as the men moved on, their shadows disappearing over the distant ridges. For a moment they allowed themselves to breathe. Ayanna leaned against Jake, her body trembling from exhaustion and relief. I thought we wouldn't make it," she admitted softly. Jake shook his head, a small smile breaking through his seriousness. "We made it," he said, "and we'll keep making it, one step at a time." But the respite was brief. They could not linger long in one place. The desert offered no long-term safety, and the mountains were still far away. They had to keep moving, pushing through the heat, fatigue, and fear. And so, with the horse and supplies ready, they began again, determined to reach the mountains where Ayanna's people awaited. As they traveled, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The temperature dropped, and the wind carried a chill that made them pull their coats tighter. Jake led the way, moving with careful precision, while Ayanna followed, drawing courage from his steady presence. The journey was grueling, but each step brought them closer to safety. Along the way, Ayanna began to notice the changes in herself. Her strength was returning, her muscles no longer trembling with every step. Her confidence grew, fueled by Jake's guidance and her own determination. "I feel stronger," she said quietly. "Like I can face anything now." Jake nodded, proud of her progress. "You've always had that strength," he said. "You just needed a reason to fight and someone to remind you of it." Night fell over the desert, and the stars appeared, twinkling in the clear sky like distant lanterns. Jake and Ayanna set up a small camp, careful to remain hidden from any wandering eyes. They ate what little food they had, drank water sparingly, and tended to minor injuries from the day's journey. Each night, Jake stayed vigilant, keeping watch while Ayanna rested, knowing that danger could return at any moment. During the quiet of the night, they spoke of the future, of hope, and of the life waiting for them beyond the desert. "When we reach the mountains," Ayanna said softly, "I want to help my people rebuild. I want to make sure no one else suffers like I did." Jake looked at her with admiration. "That's a brave goal," he said, "and I know you can do it. You've already survived so much, and now you have a chance to make a difference." The bond between them had grown stronger than ever. They were no longer just traveling companions. They were allies, confidants, and friends bound by shared struggle and mutual trust. The desert had tested them in ways neither could have anticipated, and each trial had made them stronger, more determined, and more connected. As the night deepened, Jake kept watch over their camp, thinking about the days ahead. The mountains were still far, the journey still dangerous, but he knew they had what it took to survive. And more importantly, he knew that together they could face anything. In the darkness, with the desert stretched endlessly around them, a quiet sense of determination settled over both of them. They had escaped danger once, survived exhaustion and injury, and grown stronger in ways neither could have imagined. And as long as they kept moving forward, trusting each other, and drawing strength from their shared courage, they knew they could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in weeks, Ayanna allowed herself to feel hope without fear. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a survivor, and she had someone by her side who refused to let her give up. The desert was still harsh, the dangers still real, but the promise of safety and freedom in the mountains gave her a reason to keep fighting. And so, under the silent gaze of the stars, they rested, two travelers bound by courage, trust, and the unyielding will to survive. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they allowed themselves a brief moment of peace, knowing that together, they could face anything the desert threw their way. The first light of dawn spilled over the mountains in soft shades of pink and gold. After days of relentless travel, exhaustion, and fear, Jake and Iana finally drew close to the land where her people lived. The mountains rose tall and strong, a promise of safety and home after the long, harsh journey through the desert. The air was cooler here, scented with pine and fresh water from the streams that ran through the valleys. Iana's heart beat faster as she gazed at the familiar landscape, a mixture of relief, anticipation, and hope flooding her chest. Jake noticed the change in her demeanor. Her steps were surer, her breathing steadier, and her eyes shone with determination. "We're almost there," he said softly. "Just a little further and you'll be home." Iana nodded, trying to suppress the emotions rising inside her. "I can't believe we made it," she whispered. "After everything, after the desert, the danger, we actually made it." Jake smiled faintly, his eyes scanning the path ahead. "It wasn't easy," he said, "but you didn't give up and neither did I. That's why we're here, and you'll be safe now." They followed the narrow trail winding through the mountains, careful but moving steadily. Every step reminded Iana of the journey they had endured, the sweltering heat of the desert, the dangerous pursuit of her attackers, the endless nights of uncertainty, and the moments when she had felt ready to give up. But each step also reminded her of the strength she had discovered within herself and the courage she had drawn from Jake. As they neared the settlement, she could see small houses made of wood and stone, smoke rising from chimneys, and people beginning their day. Her heart ached with longing, remembering her family and the home she had feared she would never see again. The first person to notice her was a young boy running along the path. He stopped suddenly, his eyes widening as he recognized her. "Iana," he shouted, running toward her. Iana's eyes filled with tears as she ran to embrace him. The boy's hug was warm and full of life, a reminder of everything she had fought to survive. Others began to gather, recognizing her and welcoming her back with smiles and tears of their own. Her people surrounded her, asking questions, expressing relief, and embracing her as if they had never let go of hope themselves. Jake watched quietly from a short distance, his hand resting on the horse. He had promised to see her safe, and now she was surrounded by the people she loved. He felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing he had kept that promise. But he also knew his presence here was no longer required. Iana was safe, and the journey had reached its end. Iana turned to him, her face radiant with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I would not be here without you. You saved my life." Jake shook his head, a faint smile crossing his face. "You saved your own life," he said. "I only helped you along the way. You had the strength all along, you just needed someone to remind you of it." The people of the village gathered around Jake, offering food, water, and warm clothes. They treated him with respect, recognizing his bravery and the role he had played in ensuring their beloved Iana returned safely. Though he had faced countless dangers in his life, this acknowledgement felt different, meaningful in a way that went beyond simple survival. Iana introduced Jake to her family, who welcomed him warmly. Her parents embraced her tightly, tears streaming down their faces, and thanked Jake repeatedly for his courage and kindness. "You brought her back to us," her mother said softly, her eyes shining. "We cannot thank you enough." Jake nodded modestly. "I did what anyone should do," he said simply. "I didn't want her to die alone, that's all." But Iana knew it was more than that. His dedication, his courage, and his refusal to give up on her had meant everything. He had shown her that hope could survive even in the darkest moments, and that the kindness of one person could change the course of a life. In the following days, Iana began to recover fully. Her wounds healed completely, her strength returned, and her spirit blossomed. She spent time with her family, sharing stories of her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the remarkable man who had guided her through it all. She wanted her people to understand the courage, determination, and compassion that had kept her alive. Jake, meanwhile, remained in the village for a short while, helping with small tasks and sharing his knowledge of survival in the harsh desert, and the ways to navigate difficult terrain. Though he was a stranger to them, his presence was valued, and he began to feel a quiet connection to the people who had welcomed Ayanna back into their fold. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting the valley in a soft golden glow, Jake and Ayanna sat quietly on a hill overlooking the village. The day had been long, filled with celebration, laughter, and relief, but now the world seemed calm and still. "I don't know how to thank you enough," Ayanna said softly, her eyes meeting his. "I can never forget what you did for me. You gave me my life back." Jake looked out over the village, then back at her, his expression thoughtful. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Just live your life fully, be strong, be brave, and keep moving forward. That's thanks enough." Ayanna nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I will," she promised. "I will live. I will help my people, and I will never forget the man who refused to let me die." The bond they had formed over the long, perilous journey was undeniable. They had shared fear, pain, hope, and courage. Jake had saved her life, yes, but in the process, they had also given each other something more profound, a connection that would endure long after the desert, the mountains, and the dangers of the journey were behind them. In the days that followed, life in the village returned to a peaceful rhythm. Ayanna helped her family rebuild what had been damaged, working alongside her people to restore homes, tend to crops, and ensure that safety and stability returned to the settlement. She shared lessons she had learned on the journey, teaching the younger members of the community about courage, perseverance, and the strength to never give up. Jake, understanding that his work with Ayanna had reached its natural conclusion, prepared to leave the village. Though he had grown fond of the people and had formed a bond with Ayanna, he knew that his place was on the road, moving forward, seeking new paths, and helping those who needed him in other ways. The day of his departure, the village gathered to see him off. Ayanna stood at the edge of the path, her eyes shining with gratitude and respect. "Be safe," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. "And remember, you will always have a place here." Jake tipped his hat, a small smile on his face. "I will," he said. "And you keep living, keep fighting, and keep inspiring those around you. You've got a life ahead of you that's worth every step of the journey." As he rode away, Ayanna watched him disappear over the ridge, a mixture of sadness and hope filling her heart. She knew that he had changed her life forever, and that the lessons of courage, trust, and determination would stay with her always. Word of Jake's bravery spread beyond the village. Stories of the cowboy who had refused to let a young Apache woman die traveled across the mountains and into the nearby towns. People spoke of his courage, his compassion, and his unwavering determination. But for Ayanna, the story was not just about bravery. It was about hope, resilience, and the power of human connection. In time, Ayanna flourished. She became a leader among her people, respected for her wisdom, courage, and the experiences that had shaped her. She never forgot the man who had saved her life, and she carried the lessons of the journey with her in everything she did. And as for Jake, he continued his life on the open trails, facing challenges, helping those in need, and moving through the world with the quiet strength of a man who knew the value of life and the power of hope. He carried with him the memory of the young Apache woman whose life he had saved, a reminder that even in the harshest deserts, kindness, courage, and determination could change the course of a life forever. The desert, the mountains, and the journey that had seemed impossible all faded into memory, but the bond formed through danger, trust, and compassion endured. Two lives had intersected under extraordinary circumstances, and in doing so, both had been forever changed. One had survived against all odds, and the other had proven that refusing to give up on someone could create ripples of hope that would extend far beyond a single moment in time. In the end, life returned to its natural rhythm, but the story remained, a story of courage, survival, and the extraordinary connection between a cowboy and a young Apache woman who had once told him to finish it quickly. And yet together, they had defied death itself.